going to come up as copy, even if you didn't need it, because you include a quote. That'll be indicated. That'll take up some of your space there. So, and I want you to do it for you. I will check. I will put a certain number through again to see if you're just blowing me off or not. But I want you to do it for you, because there will be other papers as you move on in this program where the instructors are very serious about it and will fail you if you come up with too high a score. So I just want you to get used to it. And if you go in, you should be able to lower that score by just looking at what has come out highlighted. And all right, it could be that it's a quote. You should get used to paraphrasing your quotes instead of including them liberally. It's much better. You should have been taught how to paraphrase by this time. That's taking the content and stating it in a different way. It won't come up plagiarized that way. The other way is if you are trying to use an old paper that was submitted another year, that'll come up plagiarized. Because once you're in the system, you're in there for life. And they know everybody that's passed through. So just get used to doing this. I know there are a lot of students that have criticisms about Turnitin, but it's another mechanism to help you. I would much prefer to use the mic, but again, someone stole or took out the batteries, and I didn't bring my own. I guess that's the secret here. You have to bring your own. But if you can't hear, move up. Yeah.
How do you indicate that the last increase is for your final?
It doesn't matter, because you're not going to submit it to me. You just want the score for your own use. And what I will do, a certain percentage I'll run through myself, but I'll put a different name on them. So it'll come out clean.
So you want a hard copy then, where you're not going to grade them on Turnitin?
I don't want the Turnitin copy. That's for you to learn from. I want you, and the directions are very specific in the syllabi. I want you to send it to me via email, just me, because I am correcting everyone. There's no student helper. I find I do better if I do them all myself. And you're to put in the subject area trends, paper, spring 2013. It tells you there what and your name. Be careful that you follow directions. As a nurse, and I know some of you haven't decided whether you're going that route, but if you are going to become a nurse, one thing you have to learn is how to follow directions to the T. And a lot of people over the years in this course don't know that. Yes, you're to use your own critical thinking. But if you depart from the directions, even this much, you're going to be marked down. I want your name in the subject area. I don't want to have to go through every paper looking for Mary Jones's paper. So you're to put your name, the fact that it's a paper, it's trends, it's spring 2013. Whatever it says there, just do. Does that answer your question? All right. What you get back from Turnitin is for your own use. But make sure you paste it in and additionally attach it. Why? Because some of you have different software, and I can't open your attachments, and I'm not going to bother to try. I just go to the pasted copy. It wastes too much time sending you back an email. I can't open it, convert it to Word, but I work in Word. Okay? Anything else about the paper? Any mechanical pieces? No? Make sure you use APA style to the last directions. Some of you don't. I see it coming through in some of the papers you've sent me. That's okay. But learn, if you have a quote, you must have the page numbers. If it's not a quote, you don't. If you mention the name of the author in the sentence, you don't have to put that after in brackets, but you have to put the year. Unless it's a classic, nothing before the last 5 or 6 years is relevant. Everything has changed so much. So look, unless it's a classic, and you will get to know your classics because articles on the topic will quote those classics, and that's okay. There are things, for instance, if you're talking about psychosocial care, nobody is, but if you were, probably most of the nursing models for psychosocial care come out of Rogers. Rogers' work is in the 70s, and it would be appropriate to quote Rogers on some things, all right? But unless it's a classic, don't use it if it's too old. All right, that's about it on that topic. Now, does anyone have a topic you realize I have to laugh. People, I can always tell who's listening here. And I'm tempted to say, weren't you listening? This is the answer, but weren't you listening? But I shut my mouth, I bite my tongue. But people will send me emails and say, I know the outline is due this week. I told you 3 weeks ago. You don't have to do an outline anymore. That is your choice. If you want the guidance, do it. If you don't, forget it. So I know who's listening, and if you're not listening to that, you're not listening to other things. So you're in danger. Because a lot of this course, on the exam particularly, will be whether you were listening in here. A lot of the information is my interpretation, is things I've been involved in very recently. It's not in a book. So if you weren't listening, you're up the creek. All right? Anything else? Do you want to try out a topic for your paper? Any of you? None of you want to share? Mm-hmm.
So I decided to do my topic on the lack of minority use in hospice. I emailed you about it. I've done a little bit of research. I also talked to my mother who used to work in hospice, and they both sort of felt the same way, which is like about how culture really influences how people use hospice, and even certain religions as well, and how they feel like, your family should be the one to take care of your own.
Okay, and you can elaborate on that. Why is that? Because there's notable less use among the African American community, and I shouldn't say African American. It could be Caribbean community. It could be, but among people of color, there's less use of hospice. Now, I see it, a hospital I'm very involved in that has a long-term care wing. They have about 120 Korean patients, and they hardly ever agree to go on hospice. They know they're dying, many of these people, but it's their tradition. And those of you who are Korean may know more than me, but I see it among this group. The Korean residents who are not dying will sit up round the clock with clients who are dying to give them support, to be companionable. And when I ask them, they'll say it's our culture. And it's wonderful. They never use hospice. So it could be, we've looked at it as a deficit, that certain groups don't reach out for hospice. I'm wondering if it's not a deficit, but rather a cultural thing. And I don't think it's limited to the Black community. I think there are many people. When you accept hospice, you're accepting that you're dying. There is no more curative care. No one will pay for curative care because you've said cure is not a possibility. I'm accepting that. And that's a hard position to be put in. So there are many reasons here, but it is interesting to note. And I know you said that you asked your mother, and I think she works in hospice, that's valuable, but perhaps she can give you the names of some other people in hospice, and you can contact them. But be careful. What people see is different from what's in the literature, so also go into that. Very good. Anyone else? No. All right, so closed door. Then it's not closed. You can still send them to me, and I usually get a big bump after the Friday lecture. But you can send them to me. One or two of you have gotten your papers back yet, although you didn't put it through Turnitin, and you have to do that yet. I just straightened that out. But and if you'd like to, you can give me the Turnitin score. Put it on your transmittal, say it went through Turnitin, and this is my score. And as I said, a certain number, I will go through again. The midterm, next week. It'll start at the beginning of the period. Now, unfortunately, Ann Watkins is going, I also sent you a note on that. Ann Watkins is the librarian that's responsible for nursing. Not just nursing, but the health sciences and some of the natural sciences. She's a wonderful woman. She's been here, over 30 years, I guess, but she's always very generous with her time. And she has offered to give you an instructional session on searching. It's worth it to come. Now, unfortunately, some of you will be done with your exam earlier, so I would urge you to go for coffee or something and come back. 11:30, she's going to meet any of you that are interested at the stairs on the first floor of the library that go down to the lower level. She will probably take you to a room with individual computers, and the feedback I've gotten over the years, her sessions are invaluable, not just for this paper, but in general for your whole history here at Rutgers. So I would urge you to come. Who is going to come? I just want to take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's enough. More can come. But I didn't want to get over there, or maybe I'm not. I don't know if I'm going to be there. It will depend on how you do with the exam. You can take as long as you want. But I didn't want to have Anne show up with 2 of you there. So there will be at least 10. It's definitely worth putting out to get there, definitely. She'll tell you about websites that I haven't show you how to float around between different ones. She's very skilled and very knowledgeable about the nursing and the healthcare literature. All right, so that takes care of that. Turnitin's taken care of, and Watkins taken care of. The papers are taken care of. And if you send me something, last week I was backed up. Everyone that sends something, it's been sent back. So if you didn't get it, send it again. There are one or two of you that sent things and didn't get them back. To my knowledge, everyone had everything they sent in by probably Wednesday or Thursday. So if you didn't get it back, send it to me again. And that's about it. All right. For today, I call it cleanup. There are a few things that I wanted you to know, and I don't know if you grasped it when we went through a lot of things. I'm counting on your attention to the PowerPoint and reading the book and listening to get it. I don't have to say it. I've mentioned this 100 times, all right? When we looked at the sample survey last week, and admittedly, the data is 4 years old, and there's nothing later that's come across, and with the decisions of today and the fiscal cliff and every other scare technique we've had, I don't know if they're going to invest more money in counting nurses. But there are some interesting things, not the numbers, but the pattern. And that's what's important. What nursing theorist tells you that it's the patterns you have to observe, that it's the mutual simultaneous interaction between the environment and man? What nursing theorist has that as the center? Yes? Who? What did he say? Oh, no. Much later than that. The mutual simultaneous interaction between man and the environment, so that you look for patterns. Martha Rogers, remember? She's the Curlian photography at MIT it was New Jersey Institute of Technology at that time, and the therapeutic touch, the laying on of hands for healing. She said that. And there are patterns that are worth you and I looking at. For instance, there are right now about 300,000 advanced practice nurses in the U.S. Advanced practice nurses, there are 3 types of policy for everything that happens that we talk about. There's institutional policy. That's policy within your workplace. The home care or the hospital or the nursing home, institutional policy, which you have to honor as a worker. There is legal policy. That is made through the legislature and rules and regulations through administrative law, and declaratory policy through the courts, 3 types, but that's legal. And that's made by people for people. That's made by your official representatives or their delegatees, so that we can live as a community and not like a bunch of savages. Pardon my English, but that's what we would deteriorate to if we had no law. All right? And the third type is professional policy. And that is usually beyond the horizon. That's where we want to go. Like ANA spoke out in 1965, we talked about that, and said that all nurses should be educated in institutions of higher learning. And we weren't. We're still not. We're still making inroads, and it's taken professional, it's taken really other policy to push that. For instance, we're moving towards a fully baccalaureate workforce because of the magnets. The magnets are pushing it, and consumers are looking for the magnet stamp on particularly hospitals. There are a few home care agencies and nursing homes, but it has not moved that far. It's mostly hospitals. And consumers are saying, I don't want to pay United Healthcare if they're striking deals with all hospitals. Better they look to the magnets for their relationship. And so we're moving towards that professional policy, towards institutional policies, all right? There are, according to the professional literature, professional policies, there are 4 types of advanced practice nurses. Nurse anesthetists, nurse midwives, nurse practitioners, and CNSs, clinical nurse specialists. Now, what's a CNS? A CNS is a master's prepared nurse or doctorally prepared nurse, a DNP or an MS, who has national certification for advanced practice. And historically, did everything the nurse practitioner did, but was highly specialized and therefore worked very closely with other care providers, particularly physicians, so did not care as much about prescribing medication. You follow? And these CNSs were the first advanced practice nurses, clinical nurse specialists. Over the last few years, and you see it in your data with the sample survey, that the number of clinical nurse specialists has declined dramatically. And they're not hired as frequently because employers want the advanced practice nurse to be comfortable and legally be able to prescribe. So that was the historic difference. Now, in New Jersey, at least, we're one of the few states, all of these people are called advanced practice nurses, and it becomes the responsibility of the employer to employ the one who's going to provide the most for their institution, for their organization. So clinical nurse, we do not even prepare clinical nurse specialists here at Rutgers anymore. And that was our first product here at Rutgers in our graduate program, was in 1955, and it was a psychiatric mental health nurse specialist, a clinical nurse specialist. That was the program established by Hildegard Peplau, and you should know that name. She's the mother of psychiatric nursing, came here from Teachers College, Columbia, to establish this program. But that program has morphed into a nurse practitioner in psychiatric nursing now. In other words, the full range of skills is available. The NP prescribes medications, does everything the CNS did and more. Okay? So that was a trend. It was very hard to predict some years ago. Yeah?
So CNS is more like research, basically?
No. A CNS historically did not prescribe medication and worked very closely with physicians and was highly specialized. Like, there were CNSs in cardiology and respiratory disease. There were CNSs in diabetes. Now, CNSs are rare to find a graduate of these programs just being called a CNS. They're all nurse practitioners, and they have a broader scope of practice. All right? Understand? Yeah, okay. Another change that has occurred is in home care. Initially, when the government instituted the DRGs and began giving rewards to get out of the hospital quicker, there was a prediction that home care would boom. It has not boomed. Instead, the use of home care aids, home health aids, HHA, has boomed, and RNs have been used mostly in supervisory positions for home care and in direct care where there is a serious medical problem. For instance, one of the common situations that RNs are assigned to home care is wounds. Surgical and other types of wounds that are slow in healing. Years ago, they kept these people in the hospital, no more. They will often open an operative incision in the hospital to allow it to drain if there's an indication that the person is infected. And then they pack it with gauze and send the person home. A wound heals from the inside out. So less packing goes in each time, but the nurse, it's an RN that goes in to observe the amount of purulent drainage, the amount of gauze that has to be packed in, and gradually it heals from the inside out until you can't pack anything more in, then it's healed. But it's relatively rare. Most of your home health services are done by home health aides, HHA, who are certified under the Board of Nursing. And I mentioned to you that happened in this state by executive order. An executive order of a governor, and New Jersey has very broad-based powers with the governor for executive orders. If the governor signs it, it happens already, immediately. So what an executive order does is speed up the political process. Do you hear? It speeds it up. Now, no governor is going to sign anything that is totally opposed by the people. Although transferring the home health aides over to the Board of Nursing was rather controversial. Everybody in Trenton has its own little fiefdom. And the home health aides were under a bureau called Institutions and Agencies. The same bureau that approves hospitals, approves home care organizations. So they didn't like losing control of home health aides. But it was Christy Whitman. She was the one before Corzine, right? Yeah. Christy Whitman, who signed that into law. And the argument of the nursing community is they give nursing care. They're not registered nurses, but they give nursing care. Who better to know if they're malpracticing, if they're safe to practice than nurses? We have to delegate to them. Why shouldn't we control them? And she scratched her head and says, that makes sense, and signed it. And it happened. So you avoid the political process by doing it that way. But it's not every day that the governor is signing these orders. But consequently, there was not the increase in home health service that we thought there would be. And there was an overall decrease in home visits to Medicare recipients. And you might ask why? Because probably the criteria to have a home health visit certified was changed. All right? And that probably was due to budgetary things. Now, there was an overall decrease in home visits. It does not say RN visits in home visits. So that is important to remember too. In other words, policy follows the money. You get down to it, it's always the money. All right? Many of the clinical specialists who I said there has been a decrease in their presence are also certified as nurse practitioners. And okay, I can't, it's on one of the slides. Many of them are dually certified as CNSs and as nurse practitioners because they felt, even though the job would determine what they do, they felt that they needed that credential. Any questions about advanced practice? In this state, I said professionally, advanced practice nurses are one of 4 types: CNS, NP, CRNA, and CNW. That's certified nurse midwife. But in this state, it's only 3 of those come under the law: CRNA, NP, and CNS. The midwives have refused to come under the Nursing Practice Act. I mentioned that last week, and that's because the midwives practice very closely with physicians. The attitude about nurses is very interesting. If you're curious, go into some of the survey instruments, like the Gallup poll. That's an easy one. Nurses have, for at least the last 20 years, 20 or 25 years, been identified as the most trusted professional in the lives of consumers. Now, why? Because they're seen as having the consumer's welfare foremost in their mind, as being a constant presence when you're sick or when you're frail, whether you're in a nursing home, home care agency, or a hospital, or in a clinic. But nurses have a dramatically high esteem among the American public. And that's why, over the years, whenever there has been a TV show that shows a nurse in a bad light, the American Nurses Association, and we have several other groups that do nothing but track the media to look at how nursing is portrayed. They quickly descend on the producers of these shows and have them, well, how do you make them go out of business? You go to the sponsors and you threaten the sponsors. And remember, we have 3.8 million nurses. If you get the word out, not to use Procter & Gamble, not to drink Coke, not to do things like this, it's a severe blow to the economy of corporations. And there have been several shows that have been taken off the air. Do any of you remember the Nightingales? That was a long time ago. That was in the 90s. But it was a scurrilous view of nursing, and it was very highly watched. But the American Nurses Association came down on the producers. It was taken off the air immediately. I'm not saying there weren't some good parts of it, but nurses were depicted very negatively, and we didn't feel that it did much for recruitment to the profession. Okay. Let's move on to now, how do I get out of this? I do what?
Escape.
Escape. You're right. Escape. Okay. I'm not going to go over all the leadership theories, etc. The book tells you enough about this. But what I do want to talk about is the transformational versus the transactional model for leadership. The transactional model for leadership is a model which was very popular years ago. In other words, there's a leader of the group. That leader works with the followers to divvy up the work and to move towards success. That's still correct, and it's a valid model where the followers have much less education and preparation than the leader. But in nursing, where you're going to be moving, you're going to be working constantly in groups, a group has its benefits and can be used either for distance education or face-to-face education. And you're going to have to know how to work with it. The difference between transactional and transformational is that the leader emerges from the group. The people come together to do the work, and there is no designated leader. The leader comes out of the group itself, and the followers help the leader. The goal is more elusive and has to be identified by the leader and the followers. And leadership only functions once it is legitimized by the group. In other words, you have no leader if you don't have followers. That's the basic principle. Stability comes from human relations versus from the organization. Organizations today are in relative chaos. So you have to look to the human relationships for stability. And transformational leadership says that the only stability we have is in the human relations. We have less stability, but some, from the organization, and the environment is in total chaos. So remember that as you move and try to exert your influence to bring about change. Lewin and Lippitt are the classic models for change. And it's not very difficult to understand what they say. They say that you're frozen in operating in one way. If we want to bring about change, we have to know where we want to go, and we have to unfreeze your present behavior and move you towards the new behavior. And that to do that, we have to be able to identify what are the driving and the restraining forces. Lewin and Lippitt actually professed the same model. It's just that Lippitt was a little bit more contemporary. And the role of the change agent is uniquely a concept which Lippitt and Watson and Wesley designed. In other words, when you're bringing about change with a patient, it's up to you to unfreeze. Let's take a diabetic, a newly diagnosed diabetic, and some of you might be thinking, why doesn't she use another example? Diabetes isn't that interesting, it's mundane. It's mundane, but there's been a 200% increase in the population over the last 20 years. Why? I don't believe it's because we have more diabetics. It's because we're finding them. Years ago, if you ever have any doubt that this country has done anything for the health of people, years ago, a person 65 was ancient. Today, we're talking about people who are 100 years old. One nursing home that I'm in a lot must have, well, out of a population of 600, they must have 60 over 100 years old. They used to celebrate birthdays at 90 as they gave that up, because there would be too many. People are living longer, and they're living longer because of the primary care they get a la Medicare. All right? People didn't even go for physicals years ago. So, diabetes. You're confronted with a person who eats all the wrong things. It's your job first to identify the driving and restraining forces. Does the person want to live? Does the person want to lose a second leg? He might have lost one leg to LEG, to diabetes already. He gets around okay. Does he want to lose the other leg? That's a driving force. All right? A restraining force may be that he lives with his extended family and they all eat a very unhealthy diet. And for him to have someone cook just for him or for him to do it would be unheard of. He never did this in his life. Let's say this is a man, 80-something years old, never went near the stove. It's a restraining force. So you have to get past that, and you may do that by having a change agent. A change agent is frequently the role that the nurse assumes, but the effective change agent never becomes part of the system. The effective change agent hangs on the edge of it, supports and rewards the behaviors that she or he wants to see, and as quickly as possible drops off. I often think of it like a ward, dropping off, so that that system will maintain itself. And that's Lewin and Lippitt. And their theories are still taught, and there are many more change theories that are more contemporary, that are, in a way, more dramatic. But Lewin and Lippitt, I just went and sat in on one of the leadership classes for the seniors, and they were teaching Lewin and Lippitt. I don't think we can just look at Lewin and Lippitt anymore, but it is the basic model for affecting change. Unfreezing behavior, moving behavior to a new paradigm, doing that with a change agent who never becomes part of the system, and you do this with children too. The mother or father who does for a kid constantly is crippling that kid. You have to act as a change agent. I joke, I have a big family. And from the time they were 5, they all did their own laundry. Now, they had a little step stool they stood on to get into the wash machine, but they all did their own, and no one separated whites from colors. I'm sorry. The aim was to get it clean. So they threw it in, and a brother or sister showed them how you put in the detergent, and off it went. And it didn't always get folded right. They didn't have all wash and wear stuff, but they became independent. And that is what self-care is about, and what Lewin and Libet teach us. Now, there is one newer theory of change I want you to know about, and that's called chaos theory. Because we're living in chaos most of the time. There's no sure thing anymore. My wash machine doesn't even function all the time, so it's in chaos theory. But chaos theory is a new paradigm for systems thinking, and it's a non-linear theory of change. And it was first developed in relation to nursing at Western Connecticut State University, Western Connecticut. Interesting, it's not Harvard or Yale, but a lot of very interesting things have come out of there, including the Journal of Complexity in Nursing. There is a journal that comes out of there, which is fascinating. All you need is bright people, regardless of where you are, bright people who are committed to something. And the designers of this theory thought things aren't working the way they should in society today, and applied chaos thinking, chaos theory to nursing. It's built on a few very clear principles. First, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In other words, and this is an excellent explanation for transformational change. You put together a bunch of people with different backgrounds, and it's more productive than putting together a group of even the brightest people who all have the same backgrounds. All right? Each person will see the problem from a different perspective. Look internally for solutions to problems. It's another precept of chaos theory. In other words, many of you probably bitch about Rutgers, right? So do something. Look inside yourself and ask yourself, what can I do to make this different? And that would deserve a whole session to debate. But can you do it through your student associations? Is it something that faculty would have absolutely no objection to, but no one's ever asked? Rise to difficult issues before you're faced with crisis. Don't wait for a crisis. Search for themes and identify trends over time. I am sure there was suspicion in the healthcare industry before we got to the current magnitude of the problems with diabetes that we were going to have these problems. I am sure when blood sugars began to be done on every person that came in for a physical, and there was an observation that particularly among certain ethnic groups, high blood sugar was common. You could have predicted what would be the needs of the future. You could have predicted we were going to need more clinical nurse specialists in diabetes. But we didn't. one branch of which is called chaos theory. Don't adjust to a bad situation, face it. I can think of many examples of this. I just finished graduate school at Columbia many years ago, and I went back to work, and I just thought the place was in chaos. Patients weren't getting the right care. This was a psychiatric institution, and I was demoralized at being there. I went back over to speak to one of my graduate professors, who was an ex-Army nurse. She was a tough lady. And she looked at me and said, "How egotistical of you to think that your presence could make a difference. Quit." That's not adjusting to a bad situation. Face it and get out. And that's what I did. And I never made a better decision. And the place is still chaos. And it will be until they get leadership in there that can pull it together, probably enough good thinkers so that they can act in a transformational mode. All right. Some of these other out-of-the-box thinking, critical today. And so those are some of the things that are inherent in chaos theory. And will help in your own thinking. Any questions about chaos theory, models for change? All right, let's talk about nursing organizations. There are many brands of nursing organizations. There are the traditional broad-based American organizations. There are specialty societies, many of which have international branches. The world is getting smaller and smaller. The chief organization for you at this stage in your career is the National Student Nurse Association, which has a branch here at Rutgers called Rutgers Nursing Students. They had their convention several weeks ago in Atlantic City. Hopefully, you will have the opportunity to go when you get up into the higher levels of the curriculum. I know that the clinical instructors gave their students the day if they went down to the convention. It's a real buoying experience because you're going to meet students from all different programs, older students, younger students, all age groups. And the president of the New Jersey Nursing Students for next year is a Rutgers, Candace Knight, I believe her name is, and she's the president of all the New Jersey Nursing Students. Now, the New Jersey Nursing Students is a part of NSNA, National Student Nurse Association. And they're in New York, in Brooklyn is their national headquarters. In Dumbo. Anyone know what Dumbo is? You need a broad education, you people. Dumbo, down under the Manhattan Bridge. It's called Dumbo. It's a section of Brooklyn. A very hip section. It's come up, it was a port, really, and over the last 20 years has come up dramatically. Very expensive to live in Dumbo now, and they're in Dumbo. The association, again, is invaluable. They have a convention once a year in varied cities. I think last year it was in Nashville, Tennessee. They elect national offices. Their offices you may be serving. Well, last year the president was a man student who had a previous master's degree and was in an associate degree program to get his nursing. You follow? Well, I think he's crazy, but he could have went to Rutgers accelerated program and accomplished the same thing in a year and a half and got a baccalaureate degree. He could have went to Yale. Yale has an entry-level master's degree in 2 years, full-time, summers, and you're going to school 12 months a year. 2 years you get a master's degree and take your state boards, and regardless of what type of master's, that master's can get you a lot further in the job market than an associate degree. But anyway, he is the president now, and their offices are of very, very talented people. You'd find it a dramatic experience. The other association, which will become most relevant to you when you finish this program, is the American Nurses Association and the New Jersey State Nurses Association, or New York State Nurses Association if you're going to practice in New York. There was a time when ANA had an association in every one of the 50 states and territories and Guam. Over the last 2 years, there has been a loss of some of the state associations. Why? Because some of the members felt that they were paying dues, but the association wasn't doing what they want. So some of your state nurses associations disaffiliated. New Jersey, many of your state nurses associations are also unions. New Jersey was a union until last October. We gave up our labor status. We are no longer a union. But we work closely with some of the nursing unions in this state. There are states which are labor states, and by their very nature, and others which are right-to-work states. We talked about this a few weeks ago. All right? Your southeastern states, for the most part, are right-to-work states. Louisiana, South Carolina, in that block, are right-to-work states. Which means you can have a union, but you don't have to pay anything to have that union represent you, which doesn't make sense because union services cost a lot. What does a union do? And we're going to talk about a union later on in the course, but unions represent you for negotiation with your employer over salary and benefits and conditions of employment. And nurses are mostly concerned with the care of patients, so that most strikes which have occurred by nursing unions in the past 20 years have been because of staffing. Not enough nurses to care for patients. And one of the very common legislative issues that nurses organizations have gotten into is mandating staffing. The first state to do this was California, and in California, in intensive care, a nurse may not have more than 2 patients assigned to them. On general floor duty, in a medical surgical area, may not have more than 5 or 6 patients assigned to them. Nursing administrators don't like for staffing to be addressed through legislation. Why? Because as technology changes, you may need more nurses to do the job, and it's not so easy to change the law. The law is like syrup. It takes a long time to get out of the bottle. If you don't have a law binding you to staffing, you can, if you all agree, you can change things rather quickly. All right? So this is a reason. All right. So the American Nurses Association is the first organization you should be interested in. And you join when you have to be a registered nurse to join. And you join by joining New Jersey. If you are part of New Jersey, you automatically become part of ANA. Although it is also possible to join just ANA separately. These are details I'm never going to add. I don't expect you to remember them right now, and they're in your book. But you should know that there are various ways to get to be a member of ANA. What does ANA do? ANA does not, ANA provides lobbying on a federal level. The New Jersey Association provides lobbying on a state level. It provides political education and monitoring of all your legislative bodies on behalf of nursing. For instance, the Board of Nursing has changed its requirements to be an advanced practice nurse. You have to be certified nationally, but you are only allowed to be certified in certain specialties. The New Jersey State Nurses Association has a person sitting at every Board of Nursing meeting to make sure the new requirements that go through are logical for today's practicing nurse. They monitor everything. So if you didn't have the New Jersey State Nurses Association, your rights as a nurse could go away. Yet, only about 10% of the nurses in this state belong to that association. So the other 90% of the nurses are getting a free ride because you need the work done that they do, yet they're not paying for it. It's a very sad situation, okay? Why do you need an association, a broad association like ANA and the New Jersey State Nurses Association? Because when you get your license, your first allegiance is going to be to your patients, not to any employer. And you're going to need colleagues to give you feedback on your practice, to provide a sense of solidarity and of the collective. Being a member signifies that you belong to some group. ANA provides certifications, education for you, lobbying, I already said that, leadership development, a host of opportunities to grow in the profession. And the reason these associations came to be is because once you get the RN, you're out on your own. There's no one to protect you. except the association. The association has finally gotten smart. If you call the association, and their phone number is 1-866-UR-NJSNA. All right, you don't have to remember that either, but that's how I remember it. UR-NJSNA. They will you call and you ask, can I speak to someone about a nursing practice issue? The first thing they ask now, are you a member? If you're not a member, it's $250 to talk to anyone. It's only right. For years, every Nancy and John nurse in the state was calling, tying up the lines, asking for advice on their problems. Today, you get no advice unless you pay the freight, which is the only right way to go. All right. So it gives you a sense of the collective. In countries that were once or still are communist, there are no independent nurses associations because everything is defined by the state. And there is nothing to come together in a collegial sense around. The state dictates what you have to do. The old Eastern Bloc countries, most of them, are not members of the International Council of Nurses, which is the parent organization of ANA. There are 160 individual geopolitical units in the world, and ICN has national nurses associations, I think, in about 125, 130. And the others, they're working with. But if you don't have an independent nursing organization, you cannot qualify for entrance. All right. The American Nurses Association also has a lot of satellite organizations. Like it has a PAC, PAC, Political Action Committee. A PAC is an organization that only supports candidates for public office with money and time and educates you about the positions of candidates. ANA has a PAC, New Jersey has a PAC. ANA also has the American Nurses Credentialing Center, ANCC. It was created by ANA and still is attached, but not for policy. ANCC is the unit that awards the magnet credential and certifies nurses. And certification is indicative of you being a specialist. And we'll talk about certification later on in the course. The International Council of Nurses is the parent organization of ANA. And it was established in 1899. It was established by Great Britain, the U.S., and Germany. It's an association of associations, so it's 132 national nurses organizations, from the very little to the very big. And ANA is not the biggest. I've told you, only 10, well, in New Jersey, about 10% belong. Nationally, it's about the same. About 10% of the nurses in this country belong doing the work for 3.8 million nurses. All right? The biggest association is Japan. Ironically, it's not the biggest country, but it's the biggest association. And when you talk to Japanese nurses, and particularly to student nurses, they are just in awe of JNA, Japanese Nurses Association, and can't wait to become a member. it's just a natural part of developing in the profession. They assume, as soon as you finish your education and receive your certification, and there are different ways in different countries, that you join. And everybody joins. And when they have their quadrennial, that's every 4 years, ICM has an international meeting. The meeting this year, is this year, and the meeting is in Australia, in Melbourne. There will be truckloads of Japanese because they've all come to the national and the international association, and they are the biggest. The Brits, the UK is a big association because in Great Britain, everyone who works is represented by a union. I told you many countries are wall-to-wall unionized. Every working nurse belongs to the Royal College of Nursing, which is their ANA, so as to speak. So if you're working, you're a member, but it comes with the job. And there are a lot of jobs in the UK that are not unionized, and these are mostly the private sector of healthcare. The UK has two sectors of healthcare, like we do. They have a public and a private. Everyone gets the public, national health system. And the private, almost everyone I know that lives in Great Britain has a secondary insurance. Very similar to what happens for our elder Americans in Medicare. They get Medicare, and almost everyone I know buys a Medigap insurance, Medigap. Medigap picks up what Medicare doesn't pay, all right? And that's the British model. You don't have to have a secondary insurance, but everyone that I know, and I know quite a few people there, they all have this insurance. The primary concerns of the international, and they call it their pillars. It's like getting on a queue instead of a line. It's that's a UK artifact, but the International Council and a lot of their ways have come down from the UK because their original founder and their first president, Millicent Fenech, was a Brit, all right? But their pillars are nursing education, service, and the socioeconomic welfare of nurses. They're not a union, but they're very committed to work with nursing unions in countries where they exist and to uplift the socioeconomic status of nurses. In many countries, nurses are paid no better than, I was going to say sanitation workers, they're paid pretty well, but they're paid the lowest possible wage. They're seen as no better than low-class maids. So one of their prime concerns is increasing the image, and that goes with the socioeconomic status for nursing. And they're an international liaison. They work closely with the International Hospital Association. There is one. The International Medical Association. There is one. And the International Pharmacy Association. And the International Council of Nurses is the fourth one of this big four that work together constantly. Where do they lobby? World Health, the UN. And all these bodies, remember, are not legal bodies, they're professional bodies, but they highly influence public policy in some countries. All right, you can look for yourself it's interesting that the ICN has a president who's elected every 4 years. There's never been one more than 4 years. And each president, it's been tradition that each president selects a watchword. And that watchword gears their whole presidency. So in 1901, Mrs. Fenish, and that's how they say it, Fenish, was president. She was the first president. And her watchword was work. There have been two Americans fairly lately. Dorothy Cornelius, she's the first one I remember, and you weren't around probably. Dorothy Cornelius was a labor leader from Illinois. She was executive director of the Illinois Nurses Association. Now, you know, an executive director is staff. A president is the elected official who heads an organization. Dorothy Cornelius's watchword was accountability. Now, Marguerite Madden Stiles was elected president in 1993. She was an American dean. She was dean everywhere. Not because she was so brilliant, but she was brilliant, but she preferred to move around. She was dean in New York. She was dean at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. She was dean in Florida. A brilliant woman. And her watchword was march. No system progresses as if it doesn't march forward. And I think that's almost exact from her acceptance speech. A brilliant woman. She had very unique ways of seeing the world. She wanted to become president of ICN, and I was associated with her very closely. And I said to her, Greta, her first name was Margareta, but everyone called her Greta. We're going to have to count votes. Now, if any of you have worked in elections, oh, I go missing. It's fascinating. But here in the U.S., quite frankly, you know who's going to win before the last vote's counted. You count votes. You get promises from people. I'll deliver this if you do this for me. Well, this was, and that's, I don't know if it's, I think Americans do it more above board. I'm sure Europeans and other Asians do it, and Africans do it below board, under the radar. Nobody can see it. But we, in our clumsy style, which the Europeans see us as clumsy, we plod away at this. And Greta thought this was horrible. Count votes. She thought she was very qualified, and she was. But she had a big ego, and she couldn't, and you tried to tell her, your ego is not going to get you elected. You got to make votes with people. You have to make deals with them. And one of the most powerful people to this day in ICN is the president of the Spanish nurses, Spain. Not South America, Spain. But he claims he can deliver the whole Spanish bloc. And he can. For some reason, the other nurses associations who speak Spanish and who come from Spanish heritage will do what he wants. And I don't mean that he uses subversive means, but he speaks the same language, understands the same culture, and so he was going to deliver the votes to Greta Stiles, and she could not even bear to talk about it. Don't tell me those things don't go on here, but that's politics, and politics at ICA is preeminent politics. So this person delivered the votes, and she became president, and she marched forward, and she did a dramatic amount of good for nursing. One of Greta's strong points was regulation, licensing. And she brought about, through her presence as president, the institution of licensing in most of the countries of Africa. Africa was open to licensing, and she had a special bond with them, and so she worked with them to institute licensing on almost that whole continent. And Kirsten Stalnacht was another president, and she followed Margrethe Stiles, and her watchword was humanity. She was a Dane, and she was president of all the public sector unions in Denmark. Very, very shrewd lady, and respected way past nursing. Nursing was only the one part of her career. All right, let's just quickly look over some of the things that ICN has done lately. ICN is based in Geneva, Switzerland. Years ago, it was based in the UK, in London. During World War II, its members and its leadership became afraid for ICN, and they moved to the US. No, I'm thinking wrong. They were in the US in the beginning of its history. It moved to Switzerland because it was a neutral country, and it has stayed in Switzerland. Now it is headquartered in Geneva. ICN's professional staff number maybe 10 people for the world. 10 people. And then there are maybe 10 or 12 secretarial staff. It's a minute, and the executive director is David Benton. Wonderful man. He's a Scot. And they work miracles with coming together with countries on their own behalf and moving their agenda. All right, so quickly. Development of the family nurse. They've issued white papers, position papers, and done a lot of lobbying and pulling together people from country to country who support the idea of advanced practice. And they've instituted models for a family nurse, and these are not necessarily masters prepared people. They're people who have the primary care skills that they can minister to the needy in some of the most undeveloped countries in the world. They've implemented a global study of the girl child and have done a lot of fundraising for the girl child. The girl child, you probably know, is the most discriminated against person on this globe. In many places, girl children are not registered when they're born because that way they can be safely sold for prostitution later in life. Maybe some of you knew this. I represent ICN at the UN. And we've had many sessions about this. The UN looks to the nurses of the world to register those girl babies. Because once they're registered, it's harder for them to be used in prostitution and sold or in slavery in many countries. It was hard for me to believe, but then you listen to the accounts of people they brought to the UN to give testimony. Expansion of ICN leadership programs. Many foundations give money to ICN, and the money is helped to fund other people too. It's not those 10 people that are doing everything, but to fund people who have been effective in leadership programs and brought those into countries where it's needed. Why don't we see a lot of ICN money coming in here? Because based on what ICN sees, we don't need it here. We don't need it. We have the resources to develop our own leaders. Now we can argue that, but not most of ICN resources go to the underdeveloped world. Endowment of the Virginia Henderson Fellowship. Each year there is a person who speaks at, not each year, each 4 years, at the quadrennial, who is called a Virginia Henderson Fellow. The last ICN meeting was in Taiwan, and the Virginia Henderson Fellow was Ed Holleran, a U.S. nurse from, where was he? Right now, he's at University of North Carolina. He was in nursing service administration before, wonderful man, and he studied under Virginia Henderson. He is one of her acolytes. He's about retiring now, a wonderful man. Very, very strong man. He speaks it like it is, and his address was wonderful. All right, UNICEF. If you go over to the UN and they find out you're a nurse and you're at a UNICEF meeting, they immediately bring up the baby-friendly hospital initiative. They claim, UNICEF, that nurses were single-handedly responsible for reversing the trend towards formula feeding and reinstituting breastfeeding in the third world, where you know in many places water is not safe. So you mix formula with water, and what you do is create an environment for diarrhea and other infections in the baby. Breastfeeding is the only safe option, and ICN has pushed breastfeeding for years, and the U.S. has helped with its ban on Nestle's. Nestle's is the largest producer of formula in the world. And used to give gift packages to mothers when they were going home. Of course, another piece of information, in the UK, 90% of births that are attended by anyone are attended by nurse midwives. All right? And in the rest of the world, it's either nurse midwives or lay midwives. A kindly lady who lives in the village, who's very proficient at birthing babies. Doctors and gynecologists, obstetricians, are an American creation. Know that. All right? So it was imperative, UNICEF felt, to get to nurses. And the first meeting I ever went to over at UNICEF, they treated me like I died and went to heaven. I couldn't get over it. And it was all because of this. They have infinite respect for nurses at UNICEF because of the baby-friendly hospital initiative. There are other international associations, and one is Sigma Theta Tau. We have Alpha chapter here, and Gamma chapter is at Seton Hall. And Alpha, it was one of the early chapters, Alpha Omega, beginning and end, you know. And you can be inducted as a senior if you have an average of a certain level and you have support from 2 faculty members. It's for leaders in the profession. And it is an international, but not as international as ICN. However, it is an international organization. World Health is not a professional organization, but it's health agency, and you can read about these. And USAID is the U.S. Agency for International Development. It's under the State Department, and it's a place you might like to consider working after you're an RN. So, any questions about international nursing? So, a very quick tour through this area, but enough to give you the taste of it. We are international, and internationally, we're on a level with pharmacy, hospitals, medicine, and everyone else. And we've had a stable organization since the 1800s. All right, why don't you take 10 minutes and wake up? All right.
Is anyone missing a notebook? If so, it's right here. Please.
And it is Trends.
It's Trends in Healthcare. If you're missing a little notebook, it's going to be in the front. It's lonely. Pick it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In central facilities, it's monitored. In state facilities, on it's all monitored. Even if you have one still, yeah. So what do you say? All right, but the state approval is there above that And they'll bring them carries on cases that really need more nurses. So that's why they will give me full Okay? That makes it more simple. Because we don't want to drag this. myself is my business. But you should have your money. You make it. So in that case, I do not believe it should be it should be up to the patient. send it to me, and tell me what you want to reference or the scholarship. So, I see it. I just want to say a few more words about nursing organizations, and then I'm going to go looking at the blueprint for the exam, okay? And review some of the material. You saw there's a blueprint up as an announcement. I should take it off till I'm ready to talk about it. Huh? All right, there's one more category of organizations. And again, why we have so many organizations is because your license is only a foot in the door. You have to continue to keep up that license through continuing education, and there are other decisions you have to make. It's premature to talk to you about it, people, but I will anyway. When you get out of this program, you'll be concerned with taking your state board. Your state boards is minimum competency, minimum. After you get that license, you'll be looking for a job. You should look for a job in the place you want to practice for the rest of your life. Now that sounds dramatic, but I mean it. Nursing offers a plenary license, plenary. Like, what's a plenary indulgence? Any Catholics here? What's a plenary indulgence? Anyone know? Are you serious? I was cleaning out my bookshelves last night. It's going to take a year, I think. But I found a few historic pieces, and I was going to throw it out, and my husband had a fit about it. It was the old Baltimore Catechism. That's the catechism when I was in Catholic school as a little kid. You had to memorize inside and out. And one of the questions is, what is a plenary indulgence? Plenary indulgence means you're absolved of all your sins forever. Not going forward. You can become a sinner again, but all of the old ones. Plenary means complete. And nursing is a plenary license. It means when you get out of here and get a license, you can give nursing care to any patient. Medicine, surgery, geriatric, maternal child, pediatric, anyone you're licensed to do. Realistically, if you have been taking care of pediatric patients for 2 years and you decide you're going to move to another state and you're going to go work in adult medicine and surgery, you're incompetent unless you have a refresher in that. You're incompetent. So, I always tell students, pick the place you want to work and go get a license for it. Go get a job in it. So, when your instructors tell you your first job should be in medicine, surgery, in a hospital, I laugh. Your first job should be where your interest lies. And if you persevere and look for the help of faculty, you'll get that job. It also means that you should join an association and subscribe to journals that are meant for your type of practice. You must belong to a broad-based association like New Jersey State Nurses, American Nurses Association, because they protect your back. You understand? They represent you in the Congress, in the Senate, in the state, etc., with the Board of Nursing. But your practice will be specialty geared. If you're going to be a psychiatric nurse, you should join the American Psychiatric Nurses Association. And with that comes a free subscription to the Journal of Psychosocial Nursing, whose editor is a faculty member here. All right, you get that with your membership. And they're much cheaper than the broad-based association, the ANA, because I don't know, well, they do less for you. If there's a big issue before the Congress that interests your specialty, ANA does the work. They give ANA their support, but they're not doing the work, all right? So you need two types of associations, or three if you're working in more than one specialty, but at least two. The broad-based association, which is New Jersey State Nurses, and as part of that you become an ANA member, and a specialty association. And in Chapter 27, there's a list of specialty associations and what they give you. They give you continuing education, most of them. They give you a community of peers that you can communicate with on email constantly to ask your questions. I get questions every day. Yesterday was the advanced practice nurses in Alaska. Well, one of them was asking me what we get per hour down here for therapy as a psychiatric nurse. Usually it's 85% of the physician rate. I'm just telling you that. So you get, and there were all sorts of answers that were coming into her one email. So it gives you a community of peers. It sets standards for practice. It comes together with ANA, and they jointly establish standards for practice, like standards for practice in prisons. There are standards that are jointly endorsed by ANA and by the Forensic Nursing Society. And many of these specialty associations have state, national, and international chapters. There's an international Forensic Nursing Society. There's an international Psychiatric Nursing Society. And there's a state one, and there are local chapters, all right? Leadership development is another thing they do. They provide all sorts of experiences, both intellectual and functional. There's no reason. Last night there was a call out from one of the societies asking for people who wished to run for office. You're as good as anyone else. You say I am and attach your resume, and off it goes. And they'll make up a slate from that, and that's leadership experience. And many of the specialty societies certify. They have a wing, or they certify through the American Nurses Credentialing Center, which is ANA's, but some have their own vehicle to certify you in the specialty. And more employers hiring you to work in a certain area are expecting you to be certified, and there is a differential in most workplaces for certified nurses. It's not as much as we would like to see, but I'm seeing more and more of places that are giving a differential. All right? So that gives you an overlay of what associations do. Some associations have an arrangement with the employer that their dues are taken out of your paycheck. That is possible. It's mostly for the State Nurses Association, but you can have it done for other associations. The way to find out is to ask your employer. Many employers don't want to bother because it's added work for them. I hope you see that from all that we've said here today, we've given you a picture of nursing that is fairly complex. It's surely as complex as medicine. And there are a few societies, specialty societies, which represent both physicians and nurses. and other types of providers, because they feel you all work together, you should enjoy these other experiences together. If you're curious, the Nursing Experience, that book, has an appendix in it which lists all of the specialties and the organizations, and much the same should be in under the chapter 27 in this book, but it's in narrative form. So you can look and find out what interests you. Perhaps the most critical thing is you won't know the latest developments in your specialty field if you don't belong. You won't know that some of the things I think I mentioned last week, that you don't insert catheters anymore on patients who are incontinent, and that the Department of Health and Human Services in New Jersey marks you down if you have too many catheters, will issue, put you on the website that you have too many catheters. And the knowledgeable consumer will not pursue that type of nursing home that has too many catheters inserted. But you wouldn't know that the research to back up that position is several years old now, and there is, if you're working in continence, wound, and ostomy care, which is a big field. Continence, wound, and ostomy. It's a very big field. There's a certification, and many of those nurses work independently. They are reimbursed very well. And you wouldn't know these most recent changes unless you were a member of that association and reading their journal. All right, so what we're saying with everything that we've talked about so far is that there's been mammoth changes in healthcare. And you're not going to read chapter 1 and 2 until the second half of the course. But I just wanted to pull some things together for you. What prompted this insight? Last week I went to the Museum of Natural History in New York. Living where we live, you should be absolutely inspired to go to New York every day. I go every week. I mean, there are museums on every corner, and I wound up in this one because I wanted to eat in a restaurant across the street. That's one of my favorite restaurants. It's not expensive, and any of you interested, I'll tell you someday. The owner played the World Soccer League with Pele, and he lives in Jersey, and he's a delightful man. He loves nurses. So anyway, I went to the Museum of Natural History, which is right across the street. And in the antiquities, I knew it before, but it dawns on me again, that ancient Egyptians and Hebrews particularly had a very good sense of surgery and sanitation. That is why, because there was a lot of disease around in those times that we did not have any sense of. But they did operate on people, and they had an exhibit there, right where you come in the door, of skulls they had found with burr holes in them. And you might know or not that burr holes are one of the latest treatments for stroke. A person has a stroke, and if you go to your local community hospital, remember we talked about the types of hospital, they may not do the most avant-garde treatment, but if you go to a major medical center, they put burr holes in to release the pressure. When you have a stroke and part of the brain is affected, there's a pressure that builds up in that skull And if you don't do something to relieve it, more tissue will die. So the Egyptians and the Hebrews both put burr holes. I don't know if they knew the person was having a stroke or if they thought it was some supernatural happening, but they put burr holes in, relieved the pressure. And today, I know at some stroke centers, they take out a portion. They don't just put the burr holes, take a little portion of the skull out, keep it in an environment where it will be kept useful, and put it back in when the person has recovered. Phenomenal. And they weren't doing this 30 years ago, but they were doing it in 5 BC. All right? So the Egyptians and the Hebrews particularly, and the Hebrews with their dietary rules, which really, and the Romans with their aqueducts, rules of sanitation, which saved a civilization, but they were put out as religious precepts. The Hebrews, anyway, not eat pork, not mix dairy with other things because those products were contaminated. So instead of explaining the science of contamination to your constituency, just say it's the religion, don't eat it. And that's how they got around it. But fascinating material over in that museum, and if you have an opportunity to go. Hippocrates was a Greek, the father of medicine. And we went round robin with many of the things he said. He said it's imperative to treat the whole man, body and soul and psyche. I don't think he used the word psyche, but everything. You can't just treat a part of it. We went from almost ignorant medicine, and when I say medicine, I'm including nursing, to a point where we got so technical that we forgot there was a human in that body. And now we've gone back to kind of gentler treatment. Medical schools never had courses in psychology, in interviewing, in physician-patient relationship. Still, most of them don't. But many have incorporated that in the curriculum. I don't know what we have in this medical school. I've never looked into it. But nursing has always emphasized these things. And Hippocrates emphasized it in 100 BC, or whenever, AD, not BC, after Christ. And it sort of went by the wayside with time. So there are a lot of things that have come full cycle, just as the sick. There were no hospitals until Rome. You'll find that out when you read your book. Hospitals in Rome were for people that had no one to take care of them, and the rich ladies of Rome took care of people who were sick. As it became more imperative to have hospitals, what are called hospitals, there was no one to take care of these people until the Middle Ages. And during the Middle Ages, you had the growth of religious orders. And the first nurses were men. I don't know if I've mentioned that to you, but the first nurses were men. And the first nurses went to the Crusades, and they were the Knights of the Hospitalier. I'm not going to ask you that name either, and quick writing it down. But the Knights of the Hospitalier wore regular mail to do battle, went into the Crusades with the rest of the troops, and wore a red cross on their chest. Interesting. That's where the Red Cross sign came from, too. You could tell these Knights of the Hospitalier, because when you saw in the distance someone with a red cross on their chest, that was them. And they were very devoted to the cause. There was a lot of religiousness in their background, but they were the first nurses. And with time, they disappeared. And it became primarily a woman's profession, and now we're moving back. I didn't go on the internet to find out what the percentage of men is currently, but it's been going up each year in the sample surveys about 2%, because it is a highly demanding career, and we used to once think it was good preparation for women for marriage and childbearing. How insulting. I think it's insulting anyway. But people are seeing. I have a nephew that's been out of work about 4 years, college graduate, and he probably needs a therapist, but I don't want to get into that with him. And I talked to someone the other night about him, and they looked at me and said, the obvious solution is, why doesn't he go into nursing? There are such varied places to work. There are places that appeal to every sex, either one. This would be the place for him. And I thought, why did I never mention that? And unemployment will support you to get through those programs. I did mention that to you before. But nursing has come full round, and now we're getting back to the Hippocratic Oath and what was believed in years past. But during the Middle Ages, it was the religious orders that came into being and offered good care for people, unbiased care. Because before that, there was a time when sick people were seen as no better than criminals, and criminals were used to take care of them. And the British workhouses, in many of the old hospitals that you can see if you go on an international tour, criminals were used to give the care. So know that, and be sensitive to the fact that we've come a long way. But quite frankly, we're still back where we were hundreds and thousands of years ago. All right, let's look at next week's exam. There are going to be 80 questions. I'm not going to give you the questions, so better you just listen. And it's going to be everything that we had during the semester, and a few questions that I think are common sense. Now, what if you don't have the common sense to answer those? If enough of you don't have, the way I grade the exam, it's graded electronically, because that's much safer than me sitting down and going over each response. If enough of you didn't answer correctly, and there are statistics that are applied to the exam. One statistic is, did enough of you know the answer? Another one is, were the distractors, did they really fairly distract? There's a statistic for that too. All the statistics are looked at. And if I don't feel the question was fair because I didn't teach it right, although if you didn't read it right, that's your problem. But if enough of you, if all of you got it wrong, or 2/3 of you got a question wrong, I give a bonus credit for that question. I give everyone credit, all right? So it comes out fair. Historically, people do better in the final than in the midterm. Why? I don't know, because in the final, there are 1 or 2 questions from the midterm, but not a lot. And There may be a question that's repeated in the exam. I use that for my own benefit because I'm wondering if you see the same question the same, if it's written twice. I say that so that there isn't an influx of people running up here to tell me that question 10 and question 79 are the same. I know what's there, okay? So let's look at the content. The first and the largest area is the healthcare delivery system. That shouldn't be invented. I unindented it last night, but obviously it didn't keep. The questions with the healthcare system are three: quality, access, and cost. I already told you that. It's a three-legged stool, just as professionalism is a three-legged stool. Autonomy, education, and uniqueness. Everything's a three-legged stool. Know that the healthcare delivery system in this state has become increasingly controlled by government. And it started, the big jump was 65. I'm not going to ask you that either. I don't know why I say this. The numbers you'll put down, nothing else. Huh? 65 was Medicare and Medicaid. Lyndon Johnson signed it. I'm not going to ask you about him either, although he's fascinating. But within 6 months after it became law, this country was in an attack over the cost. And we became obsessed with finding ways to control cost. And one mechanism was to pass legislation which said that case mix has to be used for every segment of government-funded healthcare. Now, you know they meant every sector of federally funded, because it was federal legislation. The states control healthcare. All right? And don't say to me in your papers, the government should control. Well, think of it anyway. I'm a great supporter of states' rights. I don't want to descend. Water seeks its own level. I don't want to descend to the level of Georgia in hospitals, and I shouldn't say that, someone here from Georgia. North Carolina isn't much better. But I don't want to water down what we have, and New Jersey, the Northeast in general, has very high standards. So remember states' rights. But the federal government, because it was getting big into this stuff in the 80s, issued legislation saying they had to move into case mix. Now you should know that DRGs is a case mix for hospitals. RBRVS is the case, and this is all in your book, is a case mix for provider professionals, doctors. RBRVS and CPT codes. Every time you go to a doctor or a nurse practitioner, they have to put down on the reimbursement sheet, even if you don't get sent into the government, your CPT code and RBRVS, because that indicates how much the provider's going to get paid. Home care is OASIS. Think of it as a friendly oasis. Your home. Home care. OASIS. And they're all case mix. They're based on the qualities that are reflected in the patient, not how much the hospital wants to pay or the home care agency. It's based, and that was a quantum move for us. My God. Basing reimbursement on what a patient needs. How silly. We used to base it on how many blood tests you had and how many this and how many that. All right, so we're looking at home care oasis, DRGs, nursing homes, MDS, minimum data set, and RUGs, RUGS, resource utilization groups. All of these algorithms have at their heart a dollar amount you're going to be reimbursed for the care of that patient. And if any of you are so motivated, Google them. You can bring up, you'll see that MDS is like 13 pages. Any of you work in nursing homes, you might have seen them. It's obscene, the paperwork that has to be done. But it's all based on the conviction that if we don't get the evidence, the provider professional is going to cheat us. This country was not built on trust, it was built on strength. Remember I said with unions, all right? OASIS is interesting. They ask questions on that, like how many feet can you walk? The client. Is it a 2-story house or one? Are the bedrooms on the second floor? All this is going to indicate whether you need more help or whether you need structural help, because through the home care agency, you can also apply for stair lifts, for toilet lifts, for walkers, that all can be given to you through OASIS or through Medicare, some of it, but not stair lifts, or those graduated stairs to come out the front of your house and walk down a ramp. There is federal funding available for that to keep you in your home so that you don't have to go to an institution. It's fascinating. You should learn, or why do nurses have to know all this stuff? To be advocates for your patients. How unfair if you have a nurse caring for you, you had a stroke, you're going home, you can't use your left side, you're weak on your feet, and you ask about a wheelchair, and the nurse says, well, I don't know, I'll send in a social worker. I think that is degrading. At one point, we knew all the answers. Now we call somebody else for it. All right. The other things that came into play in 65 or 66, as soon as we got scared of the amount this program was costing us, was 2 types of health insurance: managed care and indemnity. Indemnity we had always had. Indemnity is sort of the fee-for-service model. You had 10 blood tests, so you have 10 items on your bill for which you will pay for each. And the more you have done, the more you're going to have to pay. Why? If your provider professional tells you to come back every Tuesday to have your blood pressure taken, and I've seen this, you will get paid for a visit every Tuesday with indemnity. Not in managed care. You may get paid $50 a month to take care of this person. And it doesn't matter if they come every Tuesday or one Tuesday every 6 months and take their own blood pressure at home the rest of the time. Or have a neighbor learn how to do it. Or go to the corner drugstore. Now, these commercial machines are notoriously wrong. You do know that, all right? But it usually gives you an idea. If you talk to the pharmacist, if you put your arm in twice and you get radically different readings, there are ways. Also how you feel, okay? But the point being that managed care gives you is a comprehensive program whereby $1 amount is given you is paid to the provider professional for all the services they give in a certain time period. I think most of them are once a month that they reimburse, but they could be ones that reimburse less or more frequently. But that is managed care. Now, Managed care is, and not just managed care, well, some fee-for-service plans, but mostly managed care. Managed care is definitely comprehensive. Definitely a blanket rate for everything that's done for you within a calendar period. But it uses internally other statistics to make up that rate, like cost-based billing. It will fold in to their projections exactly how much a blood test was, whereas in fee-for-service often they will charge you a very high amount for the procedures that are done on you most frequently. I'll give you an example. In managed care, the cost in fee-for-service, you'll have something on your hospital bill that says pharmacy, aspirin, and it might say $10. I can buy aspirin for a penny a piece in CVS. It's the miracle drug of the last 2 centuries, or the last century at least, but it's cheap, very cheap. Why would a hospital charge $20, $10? Why? Because they use a lot of aspirin. And if I charge a minimum amount for a lot of aspirin, I'm going to make a lot of money that enables me to run the other programs, where they are so expensive, no one would use them if they knew the cost. So cost-based billing, a primary care provider, the need to get to specialists through a general practitioner or a nurse practitioner or somebody who can view the whole man. Okay, and you don't get to a specialist unless you go through that person. And there is research currently being done on whether that really saves money or wastes it. All right, do you really need to see someone else? Or wouldn't, if you have a rash on your arm, wouldn't it most times be more cost efficient for you to go right to a dermatologist? He looks at it, he knows in one look what it is, he prescribes something, they don't even ask you to come back. Whereas the general practitioner will say, well, maybe I think it's this, prescribe something, it doesn't help, you go back and forth and back and forth. So there is a lot of research currently being done on that. The use of advanced practice nurses, United Healthcare, which provides one of the managed care programs for Medicare, uses advanced practice nurses extensively. They found out it's cheaper. So why not? Why use a physician? All right? So they are one of the managed care plans that has really gone into this. Case mix reimbursement. That's another, it's mandated for Medicare in many states like New Jersey. It's also mandated for Medicaid. But in most states, it's just Medicare. And there are certain private insurances that have gone to using them too. So these are some of the ways, in the olden days, whenever they were, bills were paid on prospective reimbursement, which means you went in the hospital, you had an insurance plan, you had 3 x-rays that wouldn't be billed until you were ready to go home. And whatever it cost the institution to do it was the price put on your bill. It was retrospectively billed. I'm sorry, prospectively. No, retro. They looked back. Versus prospectively, a prospective pricing system is one where they look forward and bill you for the whole price immediately on admission. The other word that you'll see used for a hospital and nursing home and home care costs is bad debt. Bad debt, another word for it may be uncompensated care. They pretty much mean the same thing. It means that the person who you're rendering service to has no way to pay for it. I know the concept. I know how it works. In New Jersey, every hospital puts a certain amount into an uncompensated care fund every year, into a pot. And those hospitals which have little or no bad debt put little in, and those that have a lot of bad debt put those who have a lot of bad debt put little in, and those that have no bad debt put a lot in. At the end of each quarter, it's analyzed, and the amount that the high earners put in this fund is spread around, theoretically, so that no one will be forced to go out of business for helping those that have no resources. Now, I know it works. I didn't know how until I had a patient 2 weeks ago who he had Hodgkin's disease. He's under tremendous strain, and he started to come down with a few acute diseases in the last 6 months. One was pneumonia, and I told him to go to the hospital. He said he's out of work, he has no insurance coverage, and he couldn't afford, because the most costly part of the healthcare system, you know, is the emergency room. Going in, they charge hundreds and hundreds of dollars to see someone. So I said to him, just tell them you have no insurance, you have no money. They cannot turn you away. That's federal law. They can't turn you away. And I just had my fingers crossed that this works. I know it in my head, but does it work in reality? Sure enough, no comment was ever made about his ability to pay. He's brought into an examining room. A nurse practitioner saw him. She prescribed antibiotics. He left. There was never a question about paying a nickel. And I felt good about being an American that this does work. Now, emergency room visits are dramatically costly because it's one of the parts of the healthcare system that isn't controlled for cost. They've talked about it for years. They've never controlled emergency room services for cost. The major insurers, of course, for the elderly are Medicare, for the poor are Medicaid. Who is the major payer for long-term care services? I haven't been reading. Medicaid. Medicaid and personal pay. Nursing home services. Not Medicare, Medicaid and personal pay. It's rare that Medicare pays, because Medicare will only pay if you're going to recover from this episode of illness. Medicare is an episodic program. There's an assumption you're going to get better and be able to go out and take care of yourself. Medicaid is for the poor, and most of the elderly wind up exhausting their resources if they're in a nursing home. So it's CAID and personal pay for those that have some resources. All right? We said there were 3 legs of the stool. One was quality, and there's been a lot of movement in quality over the past few years. One is all of the U.S. is broken up into geographic areas. And here in the New York area, there probably are 3 different regional sections. You go out to Montana or Wyoming, one section will probably be a state and a half. It's based on the number of Medicare recipients. And the Healthcare Advisory Board, HCAB, reviews the records of Medicare recipients. This is just for care. To find, although some states have put the same system into operation, they look at when you were admitted, when you were discharged, and what was done for you in the hospital. If things were done that didn't need to be done, they will withhold payment. And you all know about the never events. Maybe you don't. Just last year, the government identified certain never events, things that should never happen to a person in the hospital. And the government, and this is federal, will not pay if a never event happens to you, like a hospital-generated bed sore or decubitus ulcer. It's the technical name. It's a bed sore. It's a sore that develops on your body, usually from laying on bony prominences too long, or by being left wet too long, by not having enough fat under your skin due to malnutrition. Many reasons. But if you come in to a hospital, and that's why when you're admitted, or a nursing home, either one, and home care too, if you come into the healthcare system, an extensive body check is done on you. And if a bed sore crops up, if you see a reddened area as a nurse, you have to report this, because that's a precursor to a bed sore. But if you see nothing, the person is absolutely absent any bed sores, and come 3 days later, areas become reddened or the skin breaks down, the federal government will stop paying for that person's hospitalization. Now, you might think that's mean. Well, it's not mean, because by good nursing care, you can prevent these things from happening. I had a brother-in-law who died last year. He was in a persistent vegetative state. Now, for those of you who are doing your studies on dying, that's when there's no brain function except for the stem of the brain, which keeps you breathing. And he was in a nursing home for 33 years. It's inconceivable, all right, but it was 33 years. Not one bed sore or reddened area on him. He had registered nurses round the clock. They were magnificent. Not one instance of a never event. Another never event is an infection. If you come down with hospital-generated pneumonia, in other words, you didn't go in for pneumonia, but you came down with it a few days after you got there, the federal government will stop paying. And it's proper, because with good nursing care, and if you're interested, go into Medicare and put in never events, and you can read about all of them. It's appropriate. Okay, economics of healthcare, you all know. Medicare has A, B, C, D, and E. A, everybody gets as soon as they turn 65. That's for the hospital. And I think these things have to be looked at. Why should it be for the hospital? When people are in the hospital, less. But in 65, the biggest offender on cost and the primarily used setting was the hospital. So everybody gets A. B is for outpatient and provider, nurse practitioner, physician. C is a managed care option. The elderly can choose to give all their resources from the federal government and give it to, and United Healthcare is one of the I think we should buy stock in United Healthcare because they're the prime managed care given to the poor under Medicaid. They're heavily used by Medicare. Why would an elderly person choose Medicare? Because drugs are included in it. You get everything for one rate. And A, B, C, D is Medicare drugs. And Medicare drugs, that is the one Obama has promised to chip away at. Medicare drugs are only good for someone who is a very high-end user or very poor. Otherwise, it does not cover. It leaves a big hole in the middle, and you might have heard it called the donut hole. It's what it's called. People of ordinary means who use some drugs but not a lot are not going to cover it because you have to pay a fee for this. And you have to pay a fee per Part B. I think it's $109 a month. It's not cheap. But it picks up the tail. It picks up the physician cost and the home care cost. Additionally, most senior citizens are urged to buy a Medigap policy. The most reputable are offered through AARP, American Association of Retired People. Somehow, most older Americans feel they can trust them. So I hope so. Where is care given? And I'll just go quickly through this now. You should know what hospice is, the types of hospitals there are, the types of home care agencies, etc. Who gives the care? Only 2 questions on that. I don't remember what the questions are, but you know what advanced practice nurses are, you know the different types of providers, allopaths and osteopaths, physicians. They have exactly the same rights. Allopaths, even though there are many more in this country, have no more rights than osteopaths. And osteopaths, remember I told you, are prepared more for primary care. Professionalism, and we talked about that 3-legged stool. We said a little bit about history and about the education and the educational issues with nurses. The government and healthcare. What I mean here is how legislation has been involved. Theory and research, we talked about different theorists, what their major focus was. No one's going to ask you to talk about the work of any one theorist extensively. You know that the theorists we've mentioned have almost a watchword that characterizes them. They all want to go to the same place, all of them. They all want the person to return to health and self-sufficiency, every one of them. How they get there is different. That's the difference. Nursing's organizations, we talked informed consent. We mentioned this at one point when we, in our discussion, when we mentioned death and dying and do not resuscitate orders. Remember I told you that the nurse cannot execute informed consent or DNRs or stuff like that, cannot execute. But the nurse is responsible to see that all of the factors have been complied with. The patient understands. The proper forms are being used. All of those things. And to speak up where a patient doesn't understand. During your career, you will go into a patient, I swear. You may be going out to a stretcher to put their file under the mattress. That's where we usually put it, stick it under the mattress. And an aide is going to wheel the patient up to the operating room, and you'll say, you're all ready for today? I'll be here when you get back. And the patient looks at you and says, why, what's happening today? And you realize that the doctor never spoke to the patient, you did, but you didn't do it adequately. You didn't say to them, all right, now you tell me what I just told you, or you didn't lower your vocabulary to 5th grade level. That's the average level of most of the American public. So use it, even if you sound stupid. I mince every word. I will ask every patient, now tell me what you understand from what I said. And they'll give it back to you, because someday you're going to run into that. So you should do very well, and don't go ballistic about this exam. It's another exam. If you've been doing what you should, straight through, it should not take much study. Better you go to the movies next Thursday night. I'm serious. And get a good night's sleep. Any questions at all? Any? Okay. I'll see you next week.
Talk about how we should study about this. There's no way to do a legitimate review thing.
You're gonna post this one, right?
Of course.
Yeah.